But it's even better when they could do it note for note, but then start to play, and they just get into a rhythm that's something else. And if it's really working well, then everyone in the whole place is in the same rhythm, and it's all pulsing with the same beat, let's say. And everyone's just thrilled out of their mind, which is why there's like 50,000 people doing it. And it's useful to know, what are you doing there? And the answer seems to be, you're playing along with your favorite band. That's a pretty good deal, because you got these highly skilled, creative people up front doing their best, allowing you to mimic that in some real sense as part of the experience. People will sing along and they'll dance. That's all mimicry. You can't help but dance. That's all part of the spirit of play. And so you treat yourself like you're someone responsible for helping. It's a serious injunction, even though its aim is play. And this is part of asking, too, before you receive. It's like, okay, give yourself the benefit of the doubt, even though it's hard, given your appalling, pathetic, ignorant, lazy nature, and all the things you could be that you aren't. It's hard to give yourself the benefit of the doubt, but you could say, well, would it really be so terrible if my life wasn't miserable? Would it be so terrible if I got what I wanted and needed, especially if I was doing that in the best possible way? And that has to be a serious question, right? You can't just tell yourself this. You have to open yourself up to the possibility that that might be true. Then you can say to yourself, well, if I could have what I needed and wanted in a manner that would be best for me, and you can imagine that takes a fair bit of orientation to get that question right, then what would my life look like? And that's a frightening question. People generally are loath to ask themselves that question, because there's a couple of reasons. One is, maybe you feel you don't deserve it. Well, another is you don't know that that's what you should do, because we're so badly taught that this idea is generally not presented to people, which is just absolutely appalling beyond belief as far as I can tell. But then there's more impediments too, because one of the things people do to buttress themselves against failure is to never let themselves really gain clarity about what they need and want. Let's say you try something, but you only do it half-heartedly. And then you fail, and you think, well, I didn't really fail because, I held a bunch back in reserve, and so I didn't get what I wanted, but maybe had I been all in, I would have. And so you don't have to upbraid yourself too much for the failure. Now, it's a catastrophic way to live, to sit on the fence and to not commit, because instead of risking the possibility of failure, you engage in what's essentially the absolute certainty of failure. Because if you want something worthwhile and difficult, which you probably do if you want to have an adventure and go somewhere, then what's the chance you're going to get it if you're halfway in? It's like, if you can, then you didn't aim high enough, obviously, and that's not going to be exciting or engaging. And so if you're actually pursuing something that would motivate you maximally, you can't be halfway in. But that sort of protects you against failure, because you can tell yourself, well, if I tried, I could have done it. It's like, you tell yourself that 200 times and your life's over. And so I would seriously not recommend that. And then another problem is that if you let yourself know what you need and want, then you can betray yourself, right? So do you trust yourself? And the answer is, well, not really. And the reason is, well, I trusted myself before and I misbehaved terribly, so why would I do that again? And fair enough, that's a solid question. But on the other hand, if you don't let yourself know what you need and want, what's the probability that you're going to do a random walk in the right direction? Especially given that there's lots of ways to randomly walk, and there are very few pathways to what you really need and want. And so it's an act of faith. And I don't mean the belief in preposterous things. I mean an act of existential courage to ask yourself what you need and want. Imagine you wanted to live without bitterness. You want to live without cynicism. And maybe even more, you wanted to live in something approximating a spirit of play. What would you need and want to make that happen? Well, it's very terrifying to allow yourself